Gene Hackman, a legendary Hollywood actor, has always been known for his powerful performances and enigmatic presence. But beyond his cinematic achievements, a lesser-known chapter of his life emerged, a mystery hidden in plain sight, locked away in his own driveway. For years, an old car sat abandoned outside Gene Hackman's residence, ignored by passers-by and left to decay under layers of dust and time. It was an artifact of the past, a relic that no one thought to question, until authorities intervened. What they uncovered sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. Inside the vehicle, investigators discovered a trove of tapes, letters, and cryptic notes, documents that painted a vastly different picture of the actor's life. Among the findings were recordings of private conversations, scribbled messages detailing clandestine meetings, and even references to unproduced film scripts that had mysteriously vanished from Hollywood archives. The discovery raised unsettling questions. Why had Hackman kept these items? What secrets lay buried within the tapes? As journalists and film historians dug deeper, they uncovered an astonishing revelation. Hackman, an accomplished actor, had also led a parallel life as a car enthusiast and amateur racer. His passion for speed and adrenaline wasn't just a pastime, it was an escape. Racing gave him the thrill that Hollywood couldn't, and it became an integral, hidden part of his identity. However, among the racing memorabilia found in the car, there were hints of something darker. One particular letter, penned in an unsteady hand, spoke of a deal gone wrong and keeping quiet for the sake of everyone involved. The vague wording fueled speculation. Was Hackman embroiled in a long-buried scandal, or was this merely the script of an abandoned film project? Hollywood insiders began whispering about forgotten feuds, lost roles, and unfinished projects that had inexplicably disappeared. Some claimed Hackman had once been offered a role in a film that exposed real-life corruption in the industry, only for the project to be shelved indefinitely. Was this car, with its hidden secrets, the key to unlocking a cover-up? Hackman himself, now retired and living a quiet life away from the limelight, has remained silent on the matter. Whether the documents were personal keepsakes or evidence of a bigger Hollywood mystery, one thing is certain: the abandoned car in his driveway was more than just an old vehicle. It was a time capsule of untold stories, waiting to be deciphered. As more details emerge, one can't help but wonder. How many secrets of old Hollywood remain locked away, hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered? Every face, every secret, every dirty bargain Hackman had quietly accumulated over decades. Did Hollywood believe Hackman had retired? No, he was a silent eye watching every chink in the system. And now all was revealed in that rusty trunk. Chapter 1, The Racer's Treasures. The dust-covered Toyota Seca slept in Gene Hackman's Santa Fe garage still as an elderly witness, in waiting for its tale to be heard in the harsh Highland sunlight. The car had faded from its previous glamour, but the coatings of dust could not conceal the residual breath of velocity etched into each metal panel. It was discovered after Hackman died, during a family choice to put his affairs in order. The garage door creaked open after decades of being locked. Nobody ever imagined behind that iron door was a museum of reminiscences of a half-professional racer who had conquered the death-defying turns on the 24 Hours of Daytona. In 1983, the Celica was not just an automobile, but a forbidden love affair with Hackman and the universe of speed, an affair he never boasted with the Hollywood lights on the windshield. The 1983 Daytona competitor sticker still held its corners. Frayed, but the crimson letters still visible, a tiny sticker, but it held the whole soul of Hackman on the track that year in the car. The cockpit was barely touched, as if Hackman had merely gone outside for a smoke and would be back at any moment on the passenger side. A pair of frayed leather racing gloves, the fingers creased, but the fingertips still stained with remnants of motor oil. A racing certificate imprinted with the words, Gene Hackman, official. Participant, 24 Hours of Daytona. The signature faded by time but still legible, as the bold strokes of an unbending man flipped over. Folded next to the gear stick was a tiny photograph. Gene Hackman in a white racing suit standing next to the Toyota racing team, a crooked grin covered in dust and sunburn. It wasn't the grin of an A-list Hollywood star, it was the grin of a driver willing to scorch the pavement. Come what may, for fame or glory, most G. Hackman enthusiasts could rattle off each role, every award, every pointed interview he had ever delivered, but the affair between Gene Hackman and speed, which he had concealed for so long, was an entirely alien chapter to even the most devoted enthusiast. No one actually knew why Hackman was so fond of racing. Some attributed it to his attempt to break away from Hollywood, the smoke-filled parties and cold handshakes. But there were others who felt that it was at turns at Daytona that Hackman really lived not as a star, but as a raw human being. With speed and fear close at hand, in his days in Santa Fe, he hardly ever spoke of that era. Past the Celica Esat, still unstarted, no engine roaring. But whenever Hackman appeared in the garage leaning against the cold car body. His eyes gleamed with a strange light, and as if the old races had never really ended in his mind. After Hackman died, American media at the same time reported this shocking discovery, creating a sensation no less than any Hollywood scandal. Gene Hackman, the secret racer of Hollywood big headlines, appeared on the front pages of many newspapers, sketching an entirely new picture of a screen legend. But in the midst of the clamor outside, the Celica stood there, a faithful guardian of secrets. A place concealing uncompleted races becomes. Hackman didn't get to conquer, and the engine roars that only he could hear every night when the city of Santa Fe fell silent, because for John Hackman, cinema might have been his life, but the racetrack was his soul. Chapter 2, Hollywood Relics in the Glove Box. The car doors swung open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit space that contained a silent chapter of Hollywood history. Gene Hackman's personal car, though not outwardly flashy, was filled in every corner with unreplaceable moments of his career and life behind the wheel of the car. Hackman was more than a movie star. He was the heart of stunning chases where every turn not only decided the character's survival but also risked Hackman's reputation. And standing in a Hollywood full of those ready to push each other off the glove compartment normally set aside for insurance documents or old spectacles was where Hackman stored some of his most shining memories when Santa Fe police searched the car. Following Hackman's death, no one anticipated they would discover one of the most valuable pieces of American movie history, the original script of The French Connection, 1971, a movie that not only won the prestigious Oscar statuette, but also permanently cemented Hackman's name into the ranks of the all-time great actors. But what made this paper really priceless was not merely its authenticity interspersed throughout the yellowed pages were Hackman's own scribbled handwritten notes, leaving his personal stamp on every chase sequence. The shaky, hastily written words in blue pen unmasked Hackman's real opinion of scenes, which appeared ideal. In one section, Hackman wrote too tightly at third corner, "Relax, hold, but full throttle." Just a brief note, but it summed up Hackman's whole acting credo: to live, the speed to own the character, his own flesh and blood, instead of a roll on paper under the script. Like an insurance cover for The Layered Memories was a letter in script, handwritten by director William Friedkin, who had wagered his whole career on assigning the part of Jimmy Poe Doyle to Hackman, despite numerous second thoughts by critics. Then the letter was worn, the handwriting firm but with a trace of regret, as if Friedkin was aware that after that movie, he would not be able to find another eccentric driver like Hackman. To Gene, the most courageous driver in Hollywood, who never knew fear and made every engine roar like it was his own. Without gushy praise, those words did the best to define Gene Hackman, an actor who wasn't afraid to get mud on his wheels, wasn't afraid to ram the car against the wall, and didn't need a stunt double to insulate himself in a rare 1993 interview. Hackman spoke of this letter, but he smiled only when quizzed. Why he had kept it for decades, because it's not about acting. Hackman described it as being about the road, the grit, the smell of burned rubber. That's the real prize. Critics may all their lives look at life through Hackman's lens of awards and praise, but it was the old scraps of paper in the glove compartment that really spoke to the story of a G. Hackman. No one knew, a man who made each chase scene a fight against death, not for a role, but to demonstrate that the blood of acers still coursed in the veins of a film. Legend after these mementos were unearthed. American media burst with nostalgic pieces on the golden age of real chase scenes, an age when Gene Hackman was the soul, but amidst the uproar outside, the letter and script remained locked, still closed, in the glove compartment, as if Hackman had never actually departed, but was only awaiting to come back to the driver's seat, where he and the speed machines could continue the untold stories. Because for G. Hackman, when cinema was just art, the racetrack and the burning turns were where he truly belonged. Chapter 3, The Medical Mystery Log. When the driver's side door was pulled open, a dim light from outside fell upon the worn leather surface of the glove compartment near the door panel. Santa Fe police at the time didn't expect to find ordinary personal items, like leather gloves or the Ray-Ban sunglasses Hackman habitually sported, but instead a slim folder, its corners lightly creased. The paper grew yellowed as if it had been turned many times. The cover handwritten title read merely Pacemaker Log, as a man who lived to pass 7 decades of life. Gene Hackman was accustomed to frequent checkups, but what both surprised the investigation team and later the medical community was the extent to which Hackman monitored every detail of the seemingly inanimate machine far inside his chest, not doctor reports nor hospital records. The whole operating history of his pacemaker, his heart rhythm support device, was taken carefully recorded by Hackman himself. Day by day, hour by hour after each checkup, the lines were steady, written with a fountain pen tilted slightly to the left. Not the bohemian line of an artist, but the handwriting of one compulsively protective. Each page started with a definite date, followed by figures, heart rate charts, electrical pulse rate, and even Hackman's own notes on his daily health. Once in early February, mere weeks before the doomed day of February 17th, Hackman penned a brief line which sent shivers down anyone's spine, slight irregular pulse. Noted review, with private physician, immediately there was no panic in the words. But it had a cold note, but it was carrying indescribable unease. Hackman was not type E, to readily succumb to worry or health paranoia. He had driven a car into a ditch while filming. The French Connection had piloted light aircraft in bad weather, and had survived a motorcycle accident in California. Yet the lines in the medical mystery log revealed a whole different side. A guarded, skeptical Gene Hackman who never quite trusted the device that was inserted in his chest for decades. Hackman tracked his heart rate each morning, documenting each small indication of slight tremors, unexplainable misbeats whenever he had test results from his doctor. He wrote them down meticulously at times, even adding postscripts from his personal doctor, who later became unavailable, in a December entry. Last year, Hackman wrote no anomalies found, but patient still not convinced. The phrase patient remains unconvinced was like a little proclamation, but it held Hackman's relentless anxiety regarding the pacemaker, something that was connected to his life, but never provided him with a feeling of real security following these recordings being leaked to the American press. A number of theories were floated. Had Hackman uncovered something unusual in the device's design or functionality? Had he suspected the doctors or the pacemaker maker sources asserted that Hackman had become part of a small group of high-profile cardiac patients where they exchanged details of enigmatic technic malfunctions in initial pacemaker models, even though there was no proof sufficient to suspect or conclude Hackman's fixation with each heartbeat, each digit on the monitor made the history of his pacemaker an open medical enigma. It was not merely a medical device to Hackman, it was something akin to a small Pandora's box, stuck deep within his chest, waiting to open at any time to swallow any vulnerable hope of an peaceful old age. And at last, when the car was sealed, the thin folder was still in the door pocket. A reminder that even legends have fears. They never speak of Chapter 4, the silent soundtrack. There are some moments in life which last but for a few seconds, but get recorded like a long scratch on glass. The moment the CD player in Gene Hackman's car halted on a quiet winter morning in Santa Fe was such a scratch. The car was parked closest to the trailhead, heading to the path around the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. This was the path Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, traveled each morning for almost 30 years. Santa Fe didn't have busy roads or blaring car horns. There was only the early morning sun laying a thin golden coat on the mountainside cacti standing frozen like stone statues and the wind softly blowing through the old pine trees on the dashboard of the car. The CD player was still playing, but instead of still playing the familiar gentle melody, the small screen showed a cold line, track and paused. Track in, it was later found, was Deb's Claire DeLong, the piece Betsy had played at her debut concert as a concert pianist that day. Hackman occupied the front row among the sophisticated crowd in a tiny California theater, observing in silence the woman of his life place her fingers on the keys. He once explained in an unusual interview that evening, "The music was the only thing I could hear. Everything else was merely noise. No one understood why the playlist interrupted midway. The CD was not scratched, the sound system was ideal, but the word paused was like a silent knife slicing the stream of feelings, leaving a heavy silence, as if Hackman himself, or maybe someone else, had willfully stopped the music from playing to its conclusion." Santa Fe, New Mexican, the local paper that published Hackman's obituary, noted this detail in a brief paragraph. But its significance was only fully appreciated when other parts were added to the big, imagine a speed, loving Gene Hackman, a Hackman who carefully chronicled every heartbeat, and a Hackman, a man who took his wife to view the mountains each morning for 30 years just to hear the melodies that had united them. The playlist was not only songs, it was the memories Hackman preserved from his own life. The days Betsy stood under stage lights, the afternoons they spent together by the window. Watching the sunset, the random drives along the dirty roads of New Mexico, Betsy had paused her career to be alongside, but her music never faded. It was still present, interwoven through the classical melodies. In the playlist Hackman listened to for years, Santa Fe police later confiscated the CD system for examination but discovered no evidence of tampering or malfunction. Betsy Arakawa, upon being asked, merely shook her head quietly. Some things don't require explanation because their essence is an answer. Maybe Hackman himself, on a still morning, had subconsciously pressed the pause button at the very most lovely moment of CLA DeLong. The shift from the low G note to the dreamy chord progression, like morning mist, ceased, not because the music was in trouble, but because he had to leave it there at that moment, a moment before everything shifted, a moment before silence descended. The music was not concluded because his life was not entirely over the tail of the car. The unfinished music, the man who lived every moment of his life to the fullest, all blended together, creating another silent melody. A melody no one heard, but everyone felt Hackman's playlist remains. In the hands of Santa Fe police, a final testament to sun-drenched mornings, classical melodies, and a love affair that lasted nearly 30 years stopped at the most beautiful moment, Chapter 5, Dog Hair and Desert Dust. The car, a symbol of leisurely mornings near the Santa Fe Mountains, now a melancholy fragment in the last photo of Gene Hackman. The first thing that struck the investigator was the dog hair all over on the leather seats. The floor mats, even the small crevices between the dashboard and the gear stick, they were unmistakable. The long, light-color hairs of the old dog Gene and Betsy, fondly referred to as Charlie. Charlie had been a part of the couple's life for almost 15 years. Residents of Santa Fe knew the figure of Gene Hackman, his silver hair tousle in highland sunlight, walking Charlie's leash down the trail. Behind their residence, Charlie enjoyed running ahead a little and facing back to gaze at his owner, as if to ensure that Gene was still behind. But on February 26th, when P-Man and Betsy were discovered in their quiet house, Charlie was discovered in the bathroom, dead on an old towel, without bark or sign of resistance. The strange thing was, Charlie seldom traveled in the car during his life. Charlie entered the car only when Gene placed him onto the back seat, and that was most times for camping, but something they hadn't done in years now. Charlie's hair was all over the car, combined with something even stranger, desert dust. The Santa Fe Reg is famous for its red dust storms, but the dust detected in Hackman's vehicle was not the same as the dust surrounding his residence. Forensic analysis revealed later that it was sediment dust, characteristic of the southwest desert region of Santa Fe, where there were narrow dirt roads familiar only to locals, and not on the Hackman's regular roads. This revelation prompted an unanswered question: who took the vehicle out of the neighborhood to a strange land and came back in silence? The first and most possible theory was that Gan, or Betsy, had taken someplace prior to February 17th, the day Hackman's pacemaker registered its final abnormal signal. But if so, why didn't they leave any record of the trip? No one in the neighborhood noticed them depart. No stores, gas stations, or traffic cameras captured the vehicle on main roads. The second theory, more sinister but plausible, the unexplainable gap. Perhaps a third party had borrowed the vehicle. That individual could have driven it through the dusty trails, taking Charlie or his corpse prior to returning the vehicle, giving it a quick clean and vanishing. This tidbit further stoked interest in the public. Following the Santa Fe Sheriff's press conference in a small, packed press room, a close-up image of the dust on the floor mat was displayed on a large screen. Dog hair, desert dust, a frozen playlist, desperate shreds of a greater mystery. A last trip never spoken of. Where did Hackman go? Whom did he see? And what did he do in his last days? All were still shrouded by that desert dust. Only Charlie, if he could still tell, would know what actually went on the quiet roads of Santa Fe. Chapter 6, The Unfinished Goodbye. Among the personal belongings in the trunk, a few old screwdrivers, a worn-out first aid kit, and a rumpled wool blanket. Investigators discovered a small notebook, not a rich hardcover, not a fancy lock, just a soft leather notebook. Its edges worn, the paper yellowed as though it had gone along with Hackman. Too many warm seasons in Santa Fe. As revealed by family disclosures, Hackman maintained the practice of a haphazard diary during his latter years when his health started to deteriorate. This notebook was not a work or script book, but a personal journal in which he noted private musings about life after his departure from Hollywood and opting for Santa Fe as his retreat. Santa Fe investigators called a tiny notebook, soft leather-bound cover worn as if it had been in use for many years. The writing inside was verified by the family to be Gene Hackman's. The last entry in the notebook, dated on February 16th, a day before his pacemaker registered. The first abnormal findings was released in part in the investigation report. If this is the last stretch, I have no regrets. I only regret that Betsy will have to go alone. This entry became an instant focal point on movie forums and social media. it was viewed as a brief but haunting goodbye, no different from the iconic lines in Hackman's movies. Hackman's family verified that the notebook was actually his own personal property. The contents were all written by Gene Hackman. This was not a legal will, but simply an emotional note. In a brief interview with the Santa Fe New Mexican, a close friend of Hackman recalled that the actor had long been having a bad feeling about his health. Following a general health check, doctors told him to think of replacing his pacemaker as the old one had been in service for 15 years, beyond the recommended average lifespan, but Hackman refused, worried that the surgery would impact his overall health. Newspapers also quoted a close source stating that Hackman had confided in close friends, "If that day arrives, I want it to come gently. No hospitals, no ventilators, no one to witness this statement." Along with a notebook entry, caused a lot of theories after his death that Hackman had a clear premonition of his death. GPS records from the car released by the Santa Fe sheriff demonstrated that on the afternoon of February 16th, soon after writing the final entry in the notebook, Hackman drove out the car, drove along a mountain road approximately 7 miles from his home. This was a path Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, frequently traveled every morning to view the sunrise and get commemorative photos, as per records from the Santa Fe New Mexican. It was on this path that Hackman used to tease Betsy on their wedding anniversary. "If I can't drive home myself, leave me here. It's more lovely than any cemetery I've ever seen." The vehicle halted for roughly 17 minutes. This was the actual data from the report of the investigation, but no cameras captured what Hackman did. At that time, some investigative reporters made it likely that Hackman sat in the car, wrote the final lines in his notebook before going back home. The old car was not a car, but a coffin for the bloodiest secrets G. Hackman had ever hidden. Now those in the dark are the ones ticking down the hours until those secrets are uncovered. The old car stood quietly in the garage, shrouded in the dust of time and unspoken secrets. It was more than a car, but a silent witness, a cache of memories and truths that Gene Hackman had worked hard to conceal all along his life in the trunk. There were not only personal items, but proof, documents, recordings, photographs, all betraying the dark recesses of Hollywood secrets that, if revealed, would shake an entire empire. Gene Hackman, the man with the piercing gaze and cryptic smile, was more than gifted actor, but equally a perceptive observer. Cunning gatherer of information, he had seen too much, knew too much. And now those secrets remained latent in the old car, waiting to be unleashed. Those who hid in the background, those who had cheated, manipulated, and even damaged others were now shaking. They knew that the old car was not an inanimate thing, but a dormant time bomb ready to explode at any second. Unveiling their transgressions, they were ticking away the hours, the minutes, hoping that those secrets would be eternally entombed. But the truth cannot remain concealed forever. It will escape no matter what number of hardships and adversities it will have to endure. The old vehicle with its bloody secrets would become a symbol, a reminder, a sign that no one is immune from the judgment of justice. These secrets revealed would not only rock Hollywood, but also transform how we see those that we used to esteem. The car contained not only secrets, but the threat of a reckoning, a last deed in Hackman's own terms.